We are back on MorningLine. Thanks for joining us, talking about the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attack back in 2001, and just revisiting, of course, the memorial for that and the anniversary and observations will be this weekend when the 11th comes. But we're talking about it today with Professor John Weil from Vanderbilt. And Professor, you know, as we went to the break, a lot of the questions, and the president himself was probably wondering this initially. As we think back to this, in terms of what we learned from it and whether or not there were things that we should have known, I know that a lot of people wonder, all right, how did these group of foreigners were they able to infiltrate to the degree that they did? And it's still believed by many that they had some domestic help that's never been proven, and no one was able to make any more arrests along those lines. But how did this happen? Were there flags that were blatantly missed, or is this just something that, they just pulled it off?
You know, there's some parallels to the beginning of World War II, at least for American participation. Should we have, you think about particularly the great mobilization that it took for the Japanese to attack Pearl Harbor, and how did we miss that? And, they're still examining, this island got this signal, but it didn't get sent, or it was misinterpreted. I think it's always natural to second guess this. Part of it is this was such an audacious move, and to my knowledge, planes of this size had never been, other than sort of kamikaze attacks during World War II on ships or military installations. These methods had never been used on a civilian population. So it's always easy, hindsight's 2020. It's always easy to second guess.
Yeah. I remember reading somewhere that, and I don't know how they knew this or if this was accurate, but some of the intelligence that came in the aftermath of it was that bin Laden himself was actually a little bit surprised at how effective it was. I don't know that they knew for sure that the fire and heat from that jet fuel would have actually collapsed the buildings. I think in his mind he was thinking, well, we'll just crash it in there. It'll cause a lot of damage and damage the building. I don't know that bin Laden knew that it would cause the Twin Towers to actually both collapse, and that he was actually, unfortunately, pleasantly surprised that it was even more effective than he even dreamed.
I believe he had some engineering background, so it would not surprise me if he had anticipated this, but he eventually got unpleasantly surprised again, and I think everyone's grateful for that.
Yeah, he was tracked down. It was 10 years later, but they never stopped searching, of course, along those lines. But I was looking at some of the things that have changed since then. We were talking about what we've learned, and it's like Homeland Security, right? TSA, all of those things that for us now over the past 2 decades are commonplace. We all hear about Homeland Security. Each state has one. There's a national umbrella over that. We all know about TSA when you have to go in through the metal detectors at airports. All of that a direct result of September 11th.
I think some of the airport procedures were already in place, but certainly we've been much warier. And I guess the greatest disappointment of 9/11, other than the tragedy that it was we started out so unified as a nation. And I was watching last night the members of Congress, collectively singing "God Bless America" in the Capitol. And now it seems as though we sometimes treat, domestic opponents as though they were foreign foes. And I wish we could get back a little bit to the unity of purpose and, willingness to share and willingness to sacrifice for one another that we saw in the immediate aftermath.
Yeah, I agree. That brings the country together. I wish we could. Another part of this that just comes out is that there was a big increase in video surveillance and all types of things like that to just observe and to watch. And I'm just wondering, what else has really changed in the aftermath of this in terms of security moving forward, our everyday lives as we move forward from this? I'm just curious. I mean, and I am interested, after I saw this happen, I think by nature our country has freedoms, okay? And we're free to come and go. And it scares me to a sense that I value those freedoms so much, but it also allows the possibility of someone to come in. And I really had a fear after that there were going to be many more terrorist attacks. And you're right, if there's anything that fits terrorist attacks since then, it's been by domestic terrorists, homegrown American terrorists that are attacking our own country. But I haven't seen it. I wonder if you have any thoughts as to how or why some of these terrorist groups from outside this country either have not or have been unable to strike again. And I know we've heard of some instances where they were foiled when we heard of plans. Is that because the things in place are working? I mean, I am surprised and glad there haven't been more.
Well, of course, part of what's happened is that because of our intervention abroad, what efforts have been used against us have been used on the battlefield or in foreign sites rather than here. If we hadn't gone abroad, would they have been concentrated here? I'm not sure. We're certainly much warier. It's sort of sad that, I think we become far more suspicious, unfortunately, of one another, but also of, people that have a different religion or a different language or, look a little bit different than we do. And I think that's, that sort of bonhomie that Americans have has been one of the casualties of 9/11.
Let's take a phone call from Joe. Joe, good morning. Hi, Joe.
Good morning, Nick.
Good morning.
And, Professor. I agree with this, most of what the professor said. We still, even after Pearl Harbor, we still, don't take things seriously. And domestic terrorism we got a bunch of groups in the United States that are as dangerous as anybody else is. But they were warned about these people going to flight schools. I know one case specifically, this guy, I think it was in Florida, he said he called the FBI and told them, said, look, said, I've got these guys, they want to learn how to fly a commercial jet, but I told them that it was very complicated. And they said, well, we don't want to know how to take off and land. We just want to know how to fly it once we get it there. And nobody took him seriously. So we still, I don't know what's going on in people's minds, that we think that, that this stuff is not going to happen. Well, I got news for you. Well, we can't even get half of the people in Tennessee to take the COVID shot in the United States. They're more interested in what's on Facebook or something like that than they are. How many people, and this is nothing against the Afghan people, but how many that's getting to come over here, how many of them are ISIS, just in disguise? And they'll wait, and they'll get here, and they'll catch them. But we don't do anything to these people. Domestic people, these terrorists, we catch them, we don't do anything to them.
What do you think, Professor?
Well, I think we have a pretty good vetting process for, people that come in. One of the difficulties, of course, of the situation in Afghanistan is, we did have a lot of friends there that we, have obligations to, people who were translating and whatever. There's always the fear that somebody's going to slip through, but, in cases where they've worked, closely with American military for 3 or 4 years, I think we're pretty safe. But, he's certainly right. We're suspicious of one another. We had a panel last night at MTSU on COVID. And, one of the points that was made by a number of the scholars was, how easy it is to just send a story through Facebook or online or whatever without validating it. And one of the stories that he had was a story of someone who claimed to have gotten pregnant as a result of the vaccine. And he finally traced it down, and it said, this is for entertainment purposes only, not for educational. And that, nonetheless got forwarded.
Oh, yeah. And what's even more disturbing is there are people foolish enough to even believe that. But they believe it what they read, and if they're in their own little bubble, that's what they see. So,
right.
Yeah, he mentioned Afghanistan, and I'm just wondering, with regard, I don't have concerns. I think you're right. The ones that were helping come back, many of them were involved with the military, and they're going to be vetted. But with regard to the Taliban taking control, there are more than a few people that worry that now this country there will become another hot spot for terrorist planning. And, if that becomes a threat to the U.S. or other countries around the world, I mean, is that the next, area we have to be extra concerned with now that we've left there?
Stay or go, there are going to be problems there.
Right.
I suspect that a lot of what happens from here on, in terms of U.S. protection, will be either by drones or will be covert action that, maybe is, and the difficulty of that, of course, is it undermines democratic accountability. We hope our leaders are doing the right thing. We trust that they are. But we really have no guarantee in cases where we're not actually sure what was being done.
Right. And the other part about treating inmates or folks that were arrested for this, Guantanamo Bay, we've heard about it being shut down, and, I don't even know how many prisoners are still there left, if any of them are associated with, 20 years ago still, or perhaps more. What are your thoughts about that in terms of punishment, where you put them, how you handle them? Is Guantanamo Bay something that is not needed anymore, there in Cuba, where you would house some of these terrorist suspects?
There's a term called NIMBY, which is used to talk about where do you put, hazardous waste or dumps of any kind, and it's always not in my backyard. And, it seems like an awful long way to put people in, in a base in Cuba. But when we've tried to, set up a prison within the United States to house them, a lot of people have said, we don't want to take the chance one of them will get out.
Yeah. Listen, Professor, I appreciate you joining us today. Like I said, I'm telling you, it's going to be something we'll be following closely the next 2 or 3 days as the memorials and more developments come up. And 20 years ago, and it still seems so fresh in my mind as we saw some of that video. It's just chilling to me. But really appreciate you joining us. And listen, you take care. We'll talk to you again soon, all right?
We'll do it.
Thank you, sir. Listen, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll be joined on Zoom by Mark Binda. Now, he's our programming director here at News Channel 5. And, this is the part of the show where, I invite you to join in the conversation. We'll get the numbers up again. We talked to Joe, and we didn't get a chance to ask him where he was or what he remembers about having seen it. I just want Mark and I, because he and I were together that morning live on the air when it occurred, and just kind of how in the news business, at least locally, behind the scenes, things developed here and what we did after we discovered what happened on the feed that was coming out of New York City. Again, as we were live on this very set, kind of maybe revisit some of that and then talk about how it moved forward through the day news-wise, and invite you also to join in the conversation and share with us about where you were, what you thought when you first saw it. Because like I said, for a lot of us at first, we weren't sure. We weren't sure, and then just stood there in stunned silence watching the TV live feed, not believing what we were seeing. So we'll talk with Dr. Binda, take more of your phone calls right after this.